You're with Julian on the Brown Notes, and why J.K. Rowling is a feminist icon and hero, why I still stand with J.K. Rowling, and why women are still coming last. A couple of years ago, I did a piece called I Stand With J.K. Rowling, and followed that with our biological women being erased, the whole J.K. Rowling thing. Is broadly her suggesting that being biologically female is important to her, and that makes her a distinct version of who she is. And the whole world turned around and called her a bigot. And there were elements, I said that a lot of the messier stuff in the original articles that came out about trans people in bathrooms wasn't necessary, but it wasn't up to me to tell her story. And I didn't think that was the important point. The important point, which I've brought up loads on this show, is that there is no marginalised or oppressed group that are treated like biological women, whose rights, whose ownership to their story, whose self-definition, whose politics are all horse-traded to other groups, often trans women, and who are called bigots for ever standing up for that, and who no one even talks about women's rights when they mention it. They only talk about trans women's rights when they mention it. I'm bringing this up again because of three things that have just happened in the last few days. A court in, I think, Scotland declined to prosecute a trans activist who posted her home address on Twitter. A trans play in America, they're trying to make a trans version of Harry Potter, even though it belongs to J.K. Rowling, and it will never happen anyway, because how are they going to actually make how are they going to use those copyrighted things yet not breach all of the copywriting going on? And the other one was the Harry Potter special, this mawkish display of a lot of ingrates that tried to pretend she didn't exist. And I just wish some of the cast who acknowledged that they have had their lives changed forever and will be remembered for 50 years as people watch those movies again because of her, could have shown her some credit. Could have actually, one of them could have stood by her instead of all of them jumping on the pro-trans bandwagon. Where's Emma? Emma Watson just came out and actually stood up for Palestinian rights. Why couldn't she come out and stand up next to J.K. Rowling and say, I don't agree with everything she said, but what she's really saying here is that biological women are being sidelined. Their identity is taken away from them. Women are still in last place. The trans version of it's not just a trans version. It's everyone's got to be cast in different roles. You know, we're going to have a black Harry Potter, but not called Harry Potter. This kind of stuff. But when they talk about taking off, they're going to make trans women only for certain roles in the film. It's amazing to think that it's okay to take a role defined for a biological woman off the table and give it to a trans woman and no one says anything. Could you imagine taking the role for a gay character off the table and giving it to a straight person, a role for a black person and giving it to a white person, a role for a trans person and giving it to a non-trans person? This is the only group that this happens to. And we do that with white men because white men are at the top of the pile. Yet we do this to the largest marginalised and oppressed group on planet Earth, which are women. Women still are the biggest marginalised and oppressed group. In Pakistan, 1,100 women are killed in honour killings every year. In India, something like 220 million child brides live in India. In El Salvador, you can go to jail for life, and women do for miscarrying. In Texas, they have removed women's rights as part of a wind back of abortion laws. In Afghanistan, female children are no longer allowed to go to school. Congo is a mass with rape victims who've had their arms cut off. In South Sudan, 42% of women have been subject to violence. And still, the most incredible statistic I think I've ever seen is that men are most likely to meet a violent death outside their home to someone they don't know. Women are most likely to meet a violent death globally inside their own home at the hands of their family or friends. Women are still very much, they haven't won their battle. So why are we okay with treating them as though they're white men? These aren't abstract things. Women deserve the same rights as everyone else in these groups Whether they're trans, whether they're black, whether they're gay, which is the ownership of their identity, their story, their politics, their rights, and their self-definition. And if people say that biologically being a woman is part of their story, it is. So I do still stand with J.K. Rowling.